My name is Shams Juma, and we're excited that you're here. We have over 500 registrations for this event, with 23% of it being represented from countries like India, Tajikistan, Pakistan, Tanzania, and even the UAE. We have a jam-packed session today with our panel discussions, followed up by 2 workshops that will provide more of a hands-on experience into product management. First, I'd like to introduce our body of panelists. We have Ali McKee from Google. Ali is the product lead overlooking Google Slides. We are also joined by Azhar Bandeli. Azhar is a product manager at Facebook. Oda Garami is a principal product manager at Amazon. She oversees worldwide robotics and operations. From Salesforce, we have Sarah Laiwala. Sarah is the global head of product management. For Microsoft, we have Virgilia Corputi, who is a principal product and strategy leader. Thank you all for being here. We are honored and grateful for your time, and we can't wait to get started. All right, so let's just dive in. So in 1998, Andreessen Horowitz and Ben Wheaton had pinned an article titled, "A good product manager is really the CEO of their product." While the metaphor may have raised a lot of eyebrows in the industry and got polarizing reactions, the point the article was trying to drive home was that, like a CEO, a good product manager knows their market, how their product contributes to the overall product portfolio and their competition extremely well. They also know the context and are ultimately responsible for strategy and executing a winning plan. Like a CEO, a good PM understands the interrelated parts of the business and inherited constraints as well. Unlike a CEO, however, the PM does not have any direct authority on their team. They're also not liable for the business outcome of the entire organizations. PMs have to lead with influence, general leadership skills, not just by titles. I know all of our panelists here at some point or other have had an opportunity to play the role of a founder and CEO in some capacity. Having said that, Ali, I'd love to start with you to understand if being a former founder or CEO has helped you become a product manager in your current job today at Google, and if so, why?
Absolutely, and thanks again for having me. So for a little bit of context, I had started a company called Stick that was aimed to basically reinvent the presentation format to something that was more visual, more story-based. And it was very vision driven of what is the future of presentations and answering that. And anyway, we got acquired by Google earlier this year, and now am leading Google Slides to try to continue that vision. And I would say it's the same job. And what I mean by that is, I remember when I was just getting started with Stick, I was trying to figure out, how do I build a product? What even is product management? I didn't have experience in product management before. And I met with one of my mentors, Amanda Richardson, who's a product leader based in the Bay Area. And I said, what is a PRD? How do I build, how do I do a product requirement document? What are all the things I need to do as a product manager? And she just said, she sent me that link to the article that you're referencing, actually, that gave this event the title. So I have to smile at that. But basically, her advice was, your job as a product manager is to ask why and to decide what to build. And your job as a founder is to ask why and decide what to build. And so I think the number one skill that I took from being a seed stage founder and product leader to now being product leader at Google is prioritization, just ruthless prioritization. Because, as a seed stage, as a seed stage company, if you build, if you try to boil the ocean and you try to build too many different things, you run out of runway. And so I think that prioritization is definitely the number one thing I took from being a founder over to Google.
That's fantastic. I think one of the things at Amazon, through osmosis, I've learned is that relentless prioritization is a really crucial aspect of being a PM. So I'm sure that resonates quite well. Virgilia, would love to get some thoughts from you as well around how has being a former founder played a role in your position today at Microsoft?
Thanks, Shams. And Ali, I love your story. It resonated so well with me in regards to just feeling the same feedback being heard countless times. So to give everyone background, since I was probably 14 years old, have started multiple businesses just to kind of figure out how to accumulate side hustles to first cut my own hair and fund my own Christmas presents, and then ranging on to paying for school and just trying to kind of always create some kind of side hustle. To give everyone background, I've had one company that's been acquired. I still have a lifestyle business and then a consulting business as well. When I first got into product management, also by way of a startup acquisition, my boss at the time would always tell me that, okay, you don't know what product management is, go read a book and figure it out. Then I would ask another question. You don't know what this particular theme is, go read a blog and figure it out. And so as I was trying to kind of go around, I was like, what's the point of then asking, right? Like, a product job, it's almost like being an entrepreneur, right? Because you're constantly trying to build up your own toolkit and build up your own skill set. And so I would say that being a PM, much like being a CEO or a founder, is you're putting yourself into a position that you're trying to figure out a problem from multiple vantage points, right? There's not a clear-cut answer, but you have to go and do that due diligence. Something else as a CEO, a PM needs to be really, really just comfortable with is asking the right questions. So to Ali's point, when you don't know something, just being okay, letting your ego go and ask questions, because that right there is the key to just kind of break ground in what you're trying to accomplish. Concretely speaking, I've found that there are three things that such like a CEO, a PM just has to feel very, very comfortable with. So the first one is, again, going back to just wearing multiple hats. If you think you can deep dive into a single lane and be really, really good at it, good luck. Your job as a PM is to be able to be comfortable with multiple lanes, right? So that means that unlike an engineer that you're going to go in and understand that code, no, you have to understand what the code means. Understand what the sales team is trying to accomplish, understand what the legal team has barriers around, right? So your job is to understand all those lanes. That's the first one. The second one is, and as a former Amazonian, and I know Hoda, you're probably going to speak to this too, is just being incredibly customer obsessed, right? So we take that for granted. We think that we need to have all the data, all the answers, but we can just go across the street post-COVID times. We can go across this virtual street and actually like talk to people to understand what they think about our product area. The last one is getting over that internal need and desire to always be successful. You will run into failures. Your job as a PM is just to iterate, to fail quickly, to learn, and to get back up on your feet. I think, again, as a CEO and as a PM, being comfortable with those three skill sets is incredibly important.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. So it's interesting because when you essentially help me also understand, and hopefully for the broader audience, is to really look at some of the hard skills, the soft skills, some of the being at the convergence point of business, engineering, design. If we were to break that responsibility up into look at this in attributes, I would love to understand, in addition to the ones that you've mentioned, what additional attributes of being a founder, CEO have parity with being a product manager. Sarah, I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Sounds great. So unlike Virgilia and Ali, I unfortunately did not get acquired. So back in 2008, I started a company that secures mobile payments with voice authentication. And I was an engineer working at Apple. And so I was doing all the functions, just not engineering, otherwise the code would belong to Apple. And as I did, started having customer conversations and started recognizing that what we're building is not what the customer is looking for, I realized I wanted to be in product management. That's where I needed to be. And so in 2008, when the market crashed and we didn't get our VC funding, I channeled that energy and interviewed with like 17 companies and would not accept no as an answer. Like I knew I wanted to be a product manager. And while I couldn't get a term sheet, I had to get a job in product management. And so Yahoo hired me. And I learned very quickly, just the way Ali and Virgilia are saying, like it's the same thing. And most of it is the same, right? You have to have grit. You got to be okay with failing. You have to be relentless, and you need to know what you want, right? And so just like a good founder, a good product manager works backwards from their customer. They need to know that the problem that they're solving, what they're building for, is solving that problem. And they have to create bold vision for their company. They have to create bold vision for their teams, right? So product managers tend to influence without authority. When you're a CEO, you probably have a little bit more authority, but when you're a product manager, you don't have that authority. Either case, authority or not, you have to bring people along with you. You have to be able to assess the market. You do have to do competitive analysis or SWOT analysis, if you've heard of that. You talk to your customers directly. You create focus, ruthless prioritization. You create prototypes and you test them. Like, it's a journey, right? You can't just go from an idea and then launch it. There's a journey in there. You have a strong hypothesis. You have to know what success looks like. How are you going to measure that? You create go-to-market plans, and you never say, this isn't my job. So there are lots of similarities. And those are the attributes that you want to bring, this relentless pursuit to impact the lives of customers.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that, Sarah. Ali, if we were to break that down further, would you add any additional attributes that you think are also important outside of the ones that are mentioned?
Yeah, I would just add or underline, I should say, because I think there's a lot of overlap with Sarah's definition. It's well put. But I think one is being data driven. The difference is it's a completely different type of data. As a seed stage startup, it's as many customer conversations as you can have, right? And you're dealing in hundreds, maybe thousands of users instead of millions. So it's, different type of data, but still being data driven to gut check your intuition. The second piece, this is really, really important, is storytelling. Sarah mentioned the ability to pitch a vision, both for fundraising, but also hiring to your customers. You're always selling what you're about to build, not what you've already built. And I think that ability to craft a narrative around a product, why are we building this now? What problem are we solving? What is the solution, and what is the proof that it actually works? That was kind of the formula, the storytelling formula, if you will, that used at Stick all the time of change, pain, gain, proof. And that is my job at Google these days. Is I may not be pitching to VCs, but I'm pitching to other decision makers, and it's the same pattern again and again. And I think that storytelling ability to build narratives is just so critical to success in product management.
Yep, absolutely. With my time at Google, one of the things that I learned was also that exactly what you just mentioned. I think the cost of coordination may be a little bit higher, right? Because it was, as a CEO, as a founder, you can essentially say, you wake up with an idea and you can essentially get it tested out very quickly. But inside an organization, you essentially have to do a little bit more coordination around ensuring that you can take those risks as well. So thank you for that. Let's take a step back for a second, just to make sure that we're not falling into a confirmation bias, and we really evaluate a counterpoint and really think about why, maybe an alternative perspective, but what are some opposing arguments on why a product management shouldn't think like a CEO? Azhar, I'd love to get your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, before I dive into that, generally when you have a panel of people talking about tech jobs in the Valley and the Bay Area, you just have a bunch of men talking. And I love that this panel has a bunch of successful, powerful women in tech. So thanks for IPN, and thanks for all the ladies here talking about their success and work. I hate that I have to be the odd man out, literally, and talk about the opposing view, but I'll give it a shot. So a quick background, I have an engineering background. I was a software engineer for 5-6 years, quit, started a couple of businesses. One of them was a disaster. The other one I still run today. Came to Facebook, did some data science, and then pivoted to product management. I remember from my entrepreneurship journey was my bank account was on the line every day. And if I wasn't making a sale, and if I wasn't looking at my P&L, and if I wasn't tracking my expenses, I was going to be homeless. As a PM, probably don't need to worry about that, and you're probably okay. So the pressure is a little bit lower, but not enough to be comfortable. As a PM, a lot of people that join you, or sorry, as a CEO, a lot of people that join your vision, your desire for the future, are coming to you for your mercurial abilities in a way, and they'll follow you to some degree. As a PM, you're probably working at a company. If you're working at a FANG, you're working with people who are the best of their industry. They're not going to follow you blindly. So you're going to have to do a lot more selling. You're going to have to bring a lot more evidence. You're going to spend a lot more of your time in the doors selling your vision to people who might otherwise follow you in your startup, because you're all fighting the same fight. I also wanted to touch on the job that Ali probably has is a different job than I have. Ali might be the lead, same for Sarah, where you might be the general manager of a portfolio of products. I am an individual contributor. So for my side, I don't have to manage the interactions between a bunch of different products at the same time. I have to worry about my roadmap. I have to worry about what metric I'm trying to hit. I'm trying to worry about a group of, I don't know, 15, 20 people working in the same direction and interacting with a bunch of partner teams. So that job in itself, it might be a much more like a very new startup without any funding pressures.
Great. Thank you for that, Azhar. I would love to see if anybody else has anything to add about some counterpoints and why you shouldn't, why product managers shouldn't think like a CEO.
I think the only reason why I would think a product manager shouldn't think of a CEO is that I always, when I'm working with tech partners, I actually tell them they're the owners of the product, because whenever there is an on-call, if a technology falls down, no one's going to come to me and ask me, Huda, what went wrong with this app or with this new feature. If they come to me, I'm going to pass them on to the software development manager and ask them what happened. So the accountability on quality of the actual end product or its uptime, like whatever those measures are around the technology, the onus is actually on the software development manager. So before, when I was an individual contributor, my relationship and my ownership of all the products I managed was like a trio of me, along with my technical program manager and the software development manager. And so basically the three of us were the ones who were basically, maybe the three of us were acting like the CEO, making sure that I was telling the story of like what problem needs to be solved and why is it important. The software development manager was telling me, this is how we can solve it. This is how long it's going to take us. And the technical program manager was the one who was coordinating between me and my priorities and the features that needed to be built, and then all the other dependent teams around us. So to me, the main counter argument is that it's not my word as a product manager versus everyone else. It's a collaboration between this trio, or sometimes like if there's a science and ML involved, the scientists involved in order to make the products, the features happen. And for prioritization, I can put the lens from the perspective of why something matters, but then feasibility of it, the technical execution also would impact my prioritization as well. So that ownership is divided between 3-4 people, not just one individual.
Yeah, I also wanted to add that the scale is drastically different. When I was a startup founder, getting 5 customers in a week would have been a huge success. At Facebook, if I go with an estimate of an impact for a product plan that I have, and it says, 50,000 possible new advertisers at Facebook are going to be impacted by this, I don't even get resources for doing that because it's chump change. And so that was a huge change that I had to go through between being a founder and being scrappy for every little penny versus coming to a big company and becoming a product manager and realizing, if you're not talking about the millions, it probably doesn't matter.
Yeah, and what I'd like to add is that depending on the level of product management that you're in, right? So as a CEO, you're always seeking funds and you're balancing your finances. Depending on the level you're at, you're probably not doing that, right? a vice president or a senior vice president is thinking about how am I going to go get that next set of dollars so I can realign my resources. You know, if you're complaining at the product management level, you know, a little down the chain saying, I don't have the funds to do what I need, you're not the one going and pitching for those dollars, right? And so not, while we say that you want to have the attributes of a CEO, the reality is not every one of you is fully a CEO. And that's okay, right? That's completely okay. It's just as you go up that chain, you want to exercise that. You know, you don't want to lose that financial, that business sense, because you're going to need that ultimately.
That's fantastic. Yep, that's right. Azar, you brought up a memory for me, because I remember when I was doing my startup, the first customer came in, I thought it was like 1999. Like I wanted to party. You know, so doing things at scale in a company is completely different. So I completely get that. So if we think about, you know, there's a lot of companies who institute some DNA into the way they work, right? So the DNA could be cultural, to where you could essentially, it could be a competitive differentiation, because almost everyone, if nothing else, operates at those same level of principles. Amazon's a great company that not only talks about these principles, but one thing in common that most Amazonians will have are those leadership principles that they not just put on a wall somewhere, but exercise them on a day-to-day basis. Speaking of which, I would love to understand, what are some of the product leadership principles that you are bringing into an organization on a day-to-day basis? But I'd love to start with you.
Yeah, so I think for me, being at Amazon now, it's going to be 4.5 years, and I've learned how to be a product manager at Amazon. Before Amazon, I was a financial analyst. I was a business analyst working with data and having very little impact on execution, just basically crunching numbers, which I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but those were the skills that now have helped me to be a good, very data-driven product manager. Being at Amazon leadership principles, I don't know how many of the audience know, Amazon has about 13 leadership principles that they sometimes aggregate a couple of them, introduce new ones, but these are basically the leadership principles that it doesn't matter what job function you're in, but then they really are table stake principles that really can help any employee at any job function to be very successful. So specific to product management, there are 4 or 5 of them that I really like. And I think even when I'm hiring someone or when I'm also struggling, I use them all the time. So the 2 that are table stake for any product manager and aligns with a lot of the conversation that we've had so far is that customer obsession. You're always, as a product manager, need to work backward from what are the customer needs. If you don't know why you're solving something, then you're just solving something for the sake of it's a sexy technology, or if it's like you basically have gone into a rabbit hole and don't know how to backtrack. But so always focus on customer obsession and customer needs and work backward from what are those needs. The second thing I think, which is again table stake, is ownership, which goes back to this conversation of product managers as CEOs. Because as a product manager, you need to wear multiple hats. You need to be owner of around knowing what is it that you're trying to solve? Why is it important? How can it be done? And so in each of these W questions, you're wearing a different hat. About why is it important? I need to bring my financial analytical background to do entitlement evaluations to say, okay, if I don't work on this feature, this is the impact this would have on revenue, on retention, on whatever that metric it is that matters for that product. And so ownership, I think, for example, if I go through each of these W's, you're wearing a different hat as a business analyst, as a UX designer, obviously you have all these partners who are the experts for you, but you're the one evaluating and keeping the high bar. So ownership is super important. Beyond those, I think the 3 other leadership principles that I love and I think are very critical for a product manager is to think big, which is you need to always have a long horizon perspective. You need to know not just today what you need, but also what is your 3-year vision and how can you work backward from that 3-year vision, have different features, different milestones, different pilot phases. The second one is bias for action. You need to act fast. You can't always keep going to the analysis paralysis rabbit hole. You find something, you prioritize, put in quick tests and pilots. And the last one is deep dive, which is sort of a contradiction of bias for action, but you do want to act with numbers. You do want to act with facts and go deep into data so that you can back up why you have decided to act fast on something. And so these are the 5 that I wanted to highlight. So just customer obsession, ownership, think big, bias for action, and dive deep. And these 5 of the 13, I think, are the most important for the principles, but I think I should love all of the other principles. I just have to say that.
Thank you for that. Sarah, I know your time at Amazon, what are your thoughts around what are some of the leadership principles that you bring into your organization on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so definitely the Amazon principles, right? Like I was a product manager at Yahoo, but then went over to Amazon. And those Amazon principles just become a part of who you are over time. And so I won't reiterate the ones Hoda mentioned, right? Like I think customer obsession is a key one. You're probably hearing that energy from us on this call already. I will add to Hoda for a second, just on the customer obsession side, and talk about innovation for a second, right? Like the ability to see the forest and the trees simultaneously. A lot of times we think about a cool technology, right? Like when the Alexa first came out, it was like, oh, let's build a skill. And I would just want to build a skill. But, we forget that there's a customer problem that we need to solve. And so that's imperative. Like as tech geeks, we just want to like tinker with the technology. So when I ran innovation for theme parks for Disney, 23% of the innovation projects would go to production. After a year of running that team, 76% were going to production. The reason being, it wasn't like, were we not applying cool technology? Were we not innovating? We sure were, but we were going out and talking to the P&L owners and saying like, what's top of mind for you? What are you trying to solve? How can I help advance your P&L this year? How can I help solve that customer problem? And so innovation, for the hell of innovation, is not going to work, but innovation in the context of solving customer problems is super critical, right? So let's park that. Let's talk about the soft skills. I think that the soft skills are super critical for being in product management and as you advance your career. The first one is trust, right? So trust is a big pillar here at Salesforce, where it's always our number one value. Whether you're talking to a customer or you're taking your team along a journey, you have to establish trust. So that's a key pillar. The next one is kindness. I think this is a human principle. Oftentimes, I think we get into our heads and we think like we know everything and nobody else knows anything. And if you're ever in a conversation, you're like, this person is so stupid. Why don't they understand it? And it's not because they're not stupid. Maybe you didn't communicate correctly, or maybe you're just not being kind. Like maybe there's something that you also need to do to bring them along. So remember that you're a team, right? So kindness, which is a human principle, and we all have to recognize that we're human. There's strengths and there's weaknesses. And you have to be able to take people's strengths and apply that, right? If you concentrate on the weakness, you're not going to move and you're going to achieve burnout. That is what you will achieve. And then finally, there is emotional intelligence, right? So when someone is talking, we talk about active listening, but if you go one step beneath, at its core, there's something that's happening there, right? So having that emotional intelligence to say, what is it that we're really trying to accomplish? How is this person feeling? And how do I learn from them? Having humility is really critical. There's a saying that, the people with the authority have absolutely no information, and the people with authority have no information, and the people with no authority have all the information. And so that's why active listening and lifelong learning are so critical, and having that humility. So that's what I bring when I bring leadership principles everywhere I go.
Seriously, that like the EQ was a mic drop. I completely agree. It's so funny, right? We oftentimes, when individuals want to get into product, they always ask me like, what can I do to learn? What skill sets do I need to master, right? And they're the obvious ones. Okay, like data, have a familiarity with this, read up on the innovation trends. But being a good person and just being approachable, PM is such an interesting role, right? Because we are at the center of all all the influx of information. So we're trying to build partnerships, we're trying to launch features, we're trying to ensure that we're connecting back to the overall company vision. And in order to accomplish any one of these things, you need to be able to work with other people, right? So basic communication, basic collaboration. Over like right now virtually, it's actually really easy to build those connections. We think it's harder, but reaching out to someone over chat and having a non-work related conversation, getting to know what drives them, understanding their motivation, why they're working on this particular feature. And if you want to geek out on EQ or EI a little bit more, even doing a personality test with your team, right? Like understanding what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and how you as a collective ship can move it forward. So yeah, I feel like that last part of just having a really good understanding of your team superpower and what you're contributing back to your team is incredibly important. So
Thank you.
To throw a product in the mix that I use as my secret weapon that I'll share with you all now, because it speaks to this, is this product called Crystal Knows. I don't know if anyone knows it, but essentially it's all you need is someone's LinkedIn profile, and it basically there's a machine learning model that recommends okay, it looks like they're this personality type. If you want to make a sales pitch to them, try this method, say this, don't say this. It's not perfect, but I just love the mentality of starting every meeting with, again, it's kind of customer obsession, right? Like your engineers are kind of your customers, like your sales reps are kind of your customers. Thinking about like what is in it for them and how do I frame my request or my question in a way that really lands with them. I think ultimately PMs are communicators, right? So anyway, Crystal Note, I couldn't agree more with the themes being discussed, and I think Crystal Notes is a great tool to put that into action.
Thank you for sharing that, Ali. That's really interesting. I think one of the things that Azhar and I were having a conversation about is, there's Melissa Perry. She had put out a book called How to Not Fall into the Build Trap, right? As product managers, as someone so it depends on what side, if you're working closer with design or business or engineering, we're constantly looking at ways to do some experiments, get some products out really quickly. But it's very easy to fall into that build trap. But I think it's very important to be cognizant of that, really talk about and really think about value and impact, and then figure out, go from vision to strategy to execution. So really appreciate the conversation there. Which brings me to my last question, which is, when you think about all these wonderful attributes we've talked about, and the parity that founders may have with product managers, what are some of the ways that someone who is looking to get into product management, or someone who is in product management today wants to really sharpen their skill set, their tool set, their EQ, their hard skills, soft skills? Are there things that they should be doing? For example, if someone was like, you know what, I'd love to be sort of at how do I take learning, right? If I just go down linearly, it may take me like 2 years, 2.5 years. How do I compress that timeline? Are there certain things that I can do to sort of maximize my learnings in a very short ecosystem and perhaps go launch my business? It doesn't have to be a venture-based business, but perhaps I can be at the center of, understanding business, understanding engineering, understanding design, because you're designing a solution, you're a problem solver, then working with engineering to help build those solutions. And then, hopefully the build, measure, learn, loop back, implementing that as fast as you possibly can, and pivoting and rinsing and repeating. Are there things that people can do, whether they're an aspiring product manager or a product manager that's practicing today, to compress that timeline and become better at what they do? Azhar, would love to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, this is a great question. I'm assuming that it applies to a big chunk of people listening to us today. The first thing to know is that get ready for it to take years, and that's possible. Just like you'll hear a lot of no's, it's a big bet that the hiring manager has to make to hire somebody without any product background, and that's okay. With every iteration, you just want to get some feedback and get better. The second thing that helped me was just stepping back and taking an assessment of my strengths and understanding what can I bring to the table that a traditional or a typical candidate cannot. My strength was having a software engineering background, being able to having had background building tech products. Someone else's might be design. There might be accountants on the call. There might be teachers on the call. You have a distinguishing skill that you can capitalize on and use that to stand out compared to your competition. As an extension of that, if you have a design background, you can probably think about going to a company like Airbnb. That's way more design focused than any other company. If you have an accounting background, Intuit might be a good place to go. So strategically finding opportunities is one thing that I would recommend. Another thing would be get your fundamental unit of product management tight. So the thing that Ali was mentioning earlier, understanding the customer, being able to think about a product and what goal it's solving for, measuring how you can be successful and understanding what metrics will move if you're successful, figuring out what kinds of solutions you can come up with, prioritizing them, and then designing the solution. And being able to tell that story very clearly is the basic unit of every product manager. And all the other skills that you build on top of that is a cherry on top. But if you're not able to do this fundamental thing to the point where your friends start getting annoyed by you at how often you bring up problems in the world that need to be solved, then there's work to be done. And that's, this is me selling now. That's what our breakout session number 1 is going to be about, is where it's going to take the cycle of, think about a product. How do you come up with a solution or a roadmap for it as a product manager? And so we'll do this in practice in a little bit, but yeah, think about your strengths and assets and what helps you stand out. Think about why somebody might take a bet on you based on your background and skills that are not traditionally product management related, and nail down your basic unit of your job, which is identify your customer, identify your goal, what problem are you solving for them, what stops your goal from being accomplished today, what can you do to reduce the blockers, and what are those features that can reduce the blockers, and then make sure you can measure when you launch if you're being successful or not. That's a fundamental thing. So wherever you go, whatever you're doing, whip out your phone and find out which app you're using the most, and find out what problems does that app have and how you would improve it. Do that all the time, and you'll get better.
Yep, that's great. I can't tell you how many times I've been guilty as charged of going to a point of diminishing returns and really pinpointing all the flaws in the products and the experiences that I go through. The supermarket should have done this thing this way, or the restaurant can change their layout and maybe they think this way. So I think that's a really good trait that I've observed within product managers. We're just constantly looking at the world of how it can be improved. So that definitely resonated. Which brings us, they say that time, when you're having fun, time flies. So we're down to our last question. And who I'd love to sort of get your thoughts on this is, building on what others said. What are some of the things that people should be doing or could be doing to sharpen their product management skill sets?
Yeah, I think what others said I really like is that you need to be strategic about how you can get your foot into product management. And it depends for the audience. Like if you're at a position where you're thinking of your master's degree, MBA could be a path where you can more easily get into product management, because that's where a lot of tech companies are hiring for product management managers. If you're in a tech company in a different job function, you can start asking your manager for more product or strategic type of initiatives where you can exercise some of those product management attributes. But on top of all of that, I think product management is one of those roles that a lot of people talk about it. And unless you've done it, you really I don't think it's hard to describe what it is. So I would say, read my favorite book that my manager, I can't remember which of the panelists was, my manager was always about reading a book too, or a blog, which I think as a product manager, it means that you need to learn how to problem solve yourself. And so the book that I recommend it's called Inspired, How to Create Tech Products Customers Love by Marty Kagan. And I really love this book because it's in very simple words and simple stories. It tells the story of how, like, what product managers in different companies do, how they work with tech partners, with marketing, with data analysts. And I really like it because it gives real life examples too. So if you're still trying to figure out if you like product management or what it is, or even if you want to prepare for an interview so that you can speak more toward product language, read the book. I recommend it. But just be patient, be strategic, and always think about, okay, if something's not working, then how would you fix it? If there is a need, then how would you improve it? If there's an app you're using and you're not happy with it. And products could take different shapes or forms. They could be technology products, could be physical products. And so again, I go back to what Azar said, is that play to your strengths and figure out how you can pivot and rethink through it as an owner who is trying to solve and improve that experience. And also think of yourself as a customer. What are your pain points, and like what are the things that you would like to see change in whatever application or tool or equipment it is that you're using?
That's fantastic. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for taking time out of their day and really attending your inaugural Product Micro Alliance panel discussion.